Hello and welcome back to One Trick Luxem. The Radiant Origin season started yesterday, and deck brewers all across the world are currently working on their ratios, their tech choices, and a lot of different items. This is a really cool format for Luxem players because we are learning a lot of different ratios with the new cards like Angelic Channeling, being able to banish Luxem cards from our memory and drawing more. It gives us deeper dig so we can see our key pieces faster. And right now a lot of players are wondering, what kind of space do we have? Do we sacrifice Return to the Archive for more Angelic Channeling slots? Do we want to run 3 of Channeling? Do we want to run 4? How much draw do we actually need to see to win the game? So in this series, I'm going to go through hypergeometric calculator math and also just situational math to kind of figure out how much is enough. How much do you actually need to get to level 3, stabilize and win the game? What happens if you go too much? What happens if you have not enough? Every time you invest into one area of your deck, another area suffers. If your entire deck is all draw, all engine, you won't have the tech answers to adapt to the metagame. If your entire deck is all metagame answers, you don't have enough engine and draw to actually hit the crucial numbers. So in this series, we're going to go through what those crucial numbers are. So let's take a look at possibly the worst way to play the deck, and it's probably the first way that anyone plays the deck when they first pick up Luxem. They say, okay, you're a level 3 deck. What this means is I want to get to level 3 and I want to start revealing my Luxem cards. That's actually not the best way to approach the deck, because if you're going to play the deck at all, you're going to hit level 3 eventually. What you want to do is you want to hold out as long as humanly possible before you hit level 3. And why is that? A lot of our crucial cards in our deck, like Creative Shock and even the act of leveling up, banishes our resources. When you discard for Creative Shock, that's discarding a resource. Ideally, it's float. When you're leveling to 2, for example, when you play like a Thieving Cut and you put 2 cards in memory and then you banish 2 to level to 2, those 2 cards are discard fodder. They're banish fodder. They're bad cards. And you want to see how many bad cards you can draw before you commit to going to level 2 to going to level 3. So the longer you hold out, the better your overall game plan becomes. So let's take the worst possible scenario where we are forced to level to 3 and we are not playing ideally. In this scenario, we see that on turn 1, we do not have gentle respite, we do not have creative shock and a float, and what's even worse, we don't even have a dungeon guide. Honestly, with the ratios we have in our deck, you should have some amount of pluses, but let's say, I don't know, you completely bricked, you glimpsed 6, you put all 6 at the bottom, you drew 6 yellow, 5 or so yellow cards, and you're very sad. I don't know, but your post glimpse turn is nothing. You got nothing. So you're starting with 6 influence. Let's say you're lucky enough to get to level 1 inefficiently. Let's say you have a fast cure. Let's say you have a reprogram, whatever it is. Let's say you go to turn 2, so this is your first materialization in turn 2, going to level 1. You're going to spend a resource to get there. In order to get to level 1 here, you have to spend a fast cure. You have to play exploit vulnerability and draw a card. However you look at it, you're spending 1 card to get to level 1. And then you draw after your recollection to get to 6 influence. After that, the turn after, when you go to level 2, let's say you have a Juggle Knives. You play the Juggle Knives on your opponent's end step, you ping them with damage, you draw a card. On your turn, you banish 2 to go to level 2. Your level 2 picks up the Juggle Knives, so you're going -1 with this interaction, and then you redraw for your draw for turn, and you go back to 6 influence again. So your hand size hasn't changed. Let's say on your opponent's next turn, you play Vanish from Sight just to stay alive. On your turn, you banish 3 cards from the Vanish from Sight, and you go to level 3. What does your hand look like right now? So right now, you had 6 cards in hand. You spent 4 cards to Vanish from Sight. So you had 2 cards in hand. When you recollect and draw, you have 3 cards in hand, and you can make a Lost Providence. That's the +1 here. So you technically have 3 cards in hand and 1 Lost Providence. And you will reveal whatever, if you're able to, if you're still alive by then, you can start revealing on turn 5. So this is kind of the worst possible scenario, and there's actually a way out, or a way to soften the blow when you're absolutely bricking and you can't do anything. This is not something you want to do. So the next slide is what you can do if you're having the worst day and you're not seeing anything. This is what I call the whiff play. This is when you don't draw your dungeon guide, you don't draw any +1s, you don't draw anything, everything's terrible. So let's go to 1 with float. Let's go to 2 with a cantrip. In this case, you take an off turn. So what you do is you make a backup charger and you don't crack it. So this is, in the previous slide, you would have leveled. In this situation, you don't level, and instead you make a backup charger. On that turn, you get 1 draw for your 7th influence, and hey, maybe that's a dungeon guide. But most likely, if you're having a terrible day, let's say in this example, you don't draw the dungeon guide. That's okay. On the next turn, you could vanish to 3, vanish from sight on your opponent's recollection step, fog their turn, go to your turn. You still have 3 cards in hand because 7 influence minus 4 cards means 3. So your Xander hits the board, and then in response to his trigger effect, you can crack the backup charger that you made earlier, and then you can put your hand into memory and get your first reveal at the same time as the previous play. In the previous play, you have a turn 5 reveal. In this place, you also have a turn 5 reveal. And you might do some math and say, hey, wait a minute, well, you're kind of cheating here, because in your previous slide, you're not showing turn 5, you're only showing turn 4, and that might be true, but I'm going to explain a little bit later why this is a bad line of play, this initial slide, outside of pure influence generation. Let's take a look. So technically, we have the same influence if we take an off turn or not take an off turn between the 2 scenarios. But in slide number 1, you played a fog on turn 3, and on the turn that you leveled, you have 3 cards in hand to defend for turn 4. What this means is you have 1 in cap. You maybe can cast alternative cost Resolute Stand, and then it's even worse because then you don't get the draw. You might be able to do a main phase uncover the plot and reveal double Luxem sight, but you're in a terrible scenario here because going to 3 with 3 cards in hand means that you have exactly 1 line. Your opponent can play around 1 in cap. Your opponent can play around you healing for 6 with a main phase uncover. You might have the Serene to stay alive, but you're in a very precarious situation. With the whiff play, however, notice how on turn 4 you make the backup charger. This means that you can afford to vanish on turn 5. You can also choose not to vanish. You don't have to level here. You can try and dig deeper into Dungeon Guide if you want to. It gives you options, but more importantly, you stay at 7 influence. Why is that important? It's important because you can hold double interaction. You can Topsy Decree to save yourself from getting destroyed by a spell. You can fog and incap. Let's say your opponent is a Tristan player and they have Slice and Dice, and you fog their Slice and Dice attempt. You Resolute Stand them, then they incap you, and then you lose. But in this case, you can fog their Slice and Dice, and then in response to their incap, you can incap. So you can stay alive much better with 7 cards versus 3. Also, with the previous line of play, if you're able to resolve a Angelic Channeling going to 1, let's say for example in this line, go to 1 with float. That could be fast cure, that could be any other fast speed float, but it can also be Angelic Channeling. Let's say you banished a Gleaming Cut and a Luxem Sight in this line, and it's currently sitting in your banish zone. When you make this play and you go to 3 and you crack backup charger, you are able to trigger the Angelic Channeling as you go to 3 to put those Luxem cards at the top of your deck so that you can backup charger them into your memory immediately. So you're protecting your Luxem from getting banished by going to 2, but you're also able to use that Luxem later immediately as you go to 5. You can't do that with the previous line, because in this line we level to 3, and then we're going to wait next turn. Well, I guess you could. It's just you might not be alive for that because you're holding 3 influence on like turn 4, which against most decks is kind of a death penalty. So let's talk about likelihood. Let's talk about the chances of completely whiffing all of your starter cards, of whiffing your dungeon guide in this particular case. When you start the game, you start with 6 cards that you can glimpse. Let's say you glimpse all of them and you put them at the bottom of your deck, so you can have a total of 12 cards seen at the beginning of the game. That's usually not very realistic. You might want to keep 1 or 2 cards. Let's say you're keeping 4 cards. Let's say you're only seeing 10 cards with a very conservative glimpse. You keep 10 cards. When you go to level 1, you see 2 cards off the Xander 1 glimpse, and you draw for turn. That's 13 seen. When you go to 2, you're double spelling a Juggle Knives, so you're playing a Juggle Knives, you're drawing a card. Then you go to 2, and you pick up the same Juggle Knives, and you draw another card, and then you draw for turn. So that's 16 seen. If you're going to 3, the turn after, you've already whiffed. There's no point digging for Dungeon Guide because you're already level 3. So in this scenario, in a 60-card deck, we've seen 16 cards. We have 4 Dungeon Guide in our deck. This is a hypergeometric calculation. Your chances of drawing into a Dungeon Guide in this conservative glimpse example is around 3/4, a little bit less. It's 72%, so not even 75%. If we hard mulligan, so we take our entire hand that has no Dungeon Guide, we put it at the bottom, and we see 12. We see, and then we also have 2 cantrip effects. So let's say, for example, you are able to resolve the Xander glimpse and also draw an additional card. That would be 2 off the Xander, 1 off the cantrip, and then 1 off your draw for turn from 12 to 16. Same thing here with a double Juggle Knives and draw for turn to 19. That's 19 cards seen. Our chances of drawing to Dungeon Guide improve with this line of play from 72% to 79%. So that's going from a little bit less than 3/4 to 4/5. But we can also use Angelic Channeling instead of a cantrip in the previous example to slightly increase our odds. It's actually not a lot, because let's say you Angelic Channeling 2 Luxem away, and then you draw 2 into memory. That's 2 additional cards seen, as opposed to Exploit Vulnerability in the previous example, which is just 1 card seen. So now we have 17 cards seen, plus 3 is 20 cards seen. The math is not that different. So previously we were at like 79%, now we're 81%. The main difference here is that now we have Luxem banished, so that if we go with our line, we are more powerful when we're online. So generally, we're about an 80% chance to hit a Dungeon Guide, assuming you hit some amount of draws and cantrip. I haven't even talked about Creative Shock. I haven't talked about any other draw cards you might be running. I haven't talked about Thieving Cut, Prepare drawing you a card. So the chances of seeing a Dungeon Guide is decently high, but it's not guaranteed. And we really want to be able to see that Dungeon Guide. And if we want to see a Dungeon Guide with a 90% theoretical success rate, we actually need to draw see 6 more cards. That's both easy and difficult. It just depends on how you build your deck. If you Creative Shock twice, that's already 4 more cards seen of that 6 more cards seen. If you wait to play Angelic Channeling when you have more Luxem, you can banish 4 Luxem, for example, and that's another 4 cards seen. But there are ways to hit that 90% threshold. As of right now, I don't think the decks and the cards we have access to get us there. But with the lifespan of Grand Archive, the game, there are chances for us to potentially hit this theoretical 90% to DG. And, well, it's just really good to have that number at the back of your mind, so you know that, hey, that's the goal. That's the end post for Luxem being able to have 90% consistency of hitting a DG. Of course, the numbers can also change if you include things like Heavenly Guide and whatnot, but for the purposes of this video, we're not going to go into that math. So, how many cards do we actually need to win? Let's move away from the example where we're having a terrible day, we're not seeing Dungeon Guide, and we're not seeing any +1s. Let's say that we do draw a Gentle Respite or Creative Shock and a Float to discard. In the case of this example, I'm putting them together as one thing. You know the Creative Shock plus Float line is simply on your opponent's end step, you Creative Shock, you draw 2, you discard Float. The Gentle Respite line is if you're going first and you have 6 cards, you play Gentle Respite, so now you're down to 5 influence. Your opponent has to burn through their entire hand just to hit 5 influence to mess with that combo. They're not going to do that. So Gentle Respite's going to resolve with you drawing a card into memory and having a float there. So influence-wise, I'm equating both of these lines as exactly the same, even though Creative plus Float is slightly stronger because you get to do that as an end step play, versus Gentle Respite opens you up to raccoons or whatnot. Anyways, so let's go to level 1 with a plus card, so a Gentle Respite resolved. Instead of 6 influence, we now have 7 influence. We're going to go to level 2 the exact same way, just playing Juggle Knives, banishing, going to Xander, picking up the Juggle Knives, staying at 7 influence. Now that we're at 7 influence, we can play Dungeon Guide with 6 influence. And we hold 3 in hand, and this is important because if your opponent has a Stifling Trap, you have the opportunity to incap that, versus if you didn't have a plus earlier and you were at 6 influence doing this, you can't even feign an incap, you just have to eat it if they Stifling Trap your Dungeon Guide. The turn following, you're already level 3, obviously make your Lost Providence at this stage. The turn following, you're at your turn 4, you're level 3, make a backup charger, and your first reveal is already online with 7 influence. Now, why is this important? Why is 7 influence important? Well, let's take a look. In my previous videos, I've described some of the breakpoints of Luxem. We should know by now 2 Lightweaver's Assaults is 10 influence for 16 damage at fast speed, non-targeting. We should know by now that 8 influence with a Striking Illuminance Lightweaver's combo is essentially 10 damage plus 2 times Luxem damage. So if you had 2 Luxem sites in there, for example, that'd be 10 plus 2 times 2, so 14 damage there. Yeah, I'm not going to do the math on the spot, but that's the math. In RDO, we have a new card called Elyan, Lustre Loyalty, which I should have put on the screen, but I didn't do that. What you can do with Elyan is, say you've taken, 15 damage over the course of the game, you can banish your Spirit of Serene Fire in order to have Elyan increase her attack by the amount that you've healed. And if she increases her attack by 4 or more, she gains unblockable. So in this example, we can actually just play Elyan, banish our Serene Fire, she'll go up to 8 damage, and that's exactly the same amount of damage as a Lightweaver's Assault would have done in our first example. So now we have redundancy. Instead of just relying on 4 Lightweaver's Assaults, we might have 4 Lightweavers and 1 Elyan, or 4 Lightweavers and 2 Elyan in order to get to a combo kill line. All we have to do is make sure that your opponent is actually hands down and is not able to destroy the Elyan before you can deal the damage. But on top of this line, we also have Elyan plus Striking Illuminance lines now. This is crazy because how Elyan works is she scales on the amount of healing, and Striking Illuminance is a source of healing if you show and reveal Luxem sites. So with 8 influence in hand, you're actually dealing 12 damage base because 4 damage from the Striking Illuminance, 8 damage from Elyan, but you also deal an additional 4 damage for every site that you reveal because each site is contributing 1 additional damage to the Illuminance and 3 additional damage to the Elyan. So we've actually gotten more dangerous and we can kill faster. So previously, with 8 influence, we could maybe kill them. Now at 8 influence is an actual strong threat. We can kill them if we have enough sites. And if we don't kill them at 8 influence, on the following turn, you can make up a Tengu or another +1 materialization. You draw 1 card, and then you draw another card for turn. You're at 10 in influence now. So now you're threatening the traditional double Lightweaver's combo again. So 8 influence is the bench point. the benchmark for us. This is basically saying what I said earlier, where if we're able to put in an additional source of a +1, so say we have two +1s. If we go to level 1 with a plus, and we also reveal a gleaming cut in our T4 play, we have 8 influence. If we somehow, let's say for example, we go to level 1 Xander and we use Juggle Knives on that same turn, the following turn we could potentially do a creative plus float float line in order to level to Xander. This will increase our influence from 7 influence to 8 influence and be able to get us back to that 8 influence without a gleaming cut. But essentially what we're trying to say here is a dungeon guide and 2 sources of +1s will get us there, like basically on curve very quickly. This is what I'm trying to say. So let's say you go to level 1 with a plus card, this being Gentle Respite. Going to level 2, paying Juggle Knives to go to Xander 2. Turn 3, Dungeon Guide with 7 influence, holding up in cap in case they want to stop that, making Lost Providence. On your next turn, you pop the Lost Providence to draw into one of your cards. If you had Angelic Channeling, you'd be drawing into a Luxem card here. You can make a backup charger, and then you banish it and put your hand down, you reveal a Gleaming Cut, again hitting 8 influence. 8 is the perfect breakpoint for a perfect game. Hitting 10 is obviously nicer, but we're talking more realistically hitting 8. So this is what our early game looks like. We need a plus card or 2 plus cards if we're going for that early kill. We need an Assassin Cantrip. This is Juggle Knives. This is Thieving Cut, prepared. Hitting your opponent for 3 and then drawing a card is the same thing as Juggle Knives because you can pick that back up with Xander 2 as well. It could be Exploit Vulnerability as well, but it is not Planted Explosives because Planted Explosives is not a neutral Assassin card. We need a Dungeon Guide, obviously. So your early game consists of Cantrip, Dungeon Guide, 1 to 2 +1s. Your level 3, this is greedy, but if you're able to have some combination of these cards, you can present lethal very, very early, even through a lot of you're actually putting their hands down very easily as well. If you actually level to 3 with these 4 cards, they're putting 4 cards with the hand into memory. That makes it very difficult to interact with. But in this case, let's say these are the 4 cards we have in hand with 8 influence on our level up turn. We're representing 6 damage from Serene Release, 3 damage from Revealing Luxem Sight, and 2 init damage from Elyan. Striking Luminance is, I think there's actually an error here. Oh no, it's not an error. Yeah, I'm revealing 2 Luxem because 1 Assault, 1 Sight, so that's 2 reveal additional on top of the 4 native from striking. And then you're just picking for 2 with Light Weaver's Assault. This is 19 damage with 8 influence. It's actually more damage if this were a second Luxem Sight, but I'm just using this as an example. What you'll notice is that these 2 pools of cards are very different. The cards you want to see on your kill turn are all yellow, and the cards you want to see going up are not yellow. So the bridge to both of these is Angelic Channeling, meaning that all those lines that we saw earlier, with a plus, without a plus, you can use Angelic Channeling to weave into your level up process so that when you go to your optimal backup charger lines post level 3, you're more able to hit this combination of cards. So what I'm trying to say here is, as you're building your deck, as you're selecting your ratios, know that on your way up, you want to see 2 +1s. You definitely want to see a Dungeon Guide, and you need to be able to have at least 1 Assassin neutral cantrip in order to resolve your level 2 Xander properly. But you don't need to over insert your deck with +1s because you just need to hit 8, you just need to hit 10, and we will already be presenting enough damage to end the game. You'd rather have additional cards protect our win cons. We'd rather have additional incaps or Regal Inquisitions or things to protect ourselves, things to slow our opponents down. So as we go into this very exciting season, I hope that this video has been helpful to you in terms of mathing out exactly what you need. We can talk a little bit more about deck ratios in a later video. Let me know if you want to see that. But yeah, this is One Trick Luxem, and I hope you have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye.